We're glad to know you're still there and watching The Breakfast on Plus TV Africa. Right now, we're being joined by an associate professor, an acting director of research, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, in the person of Mr. Efem Ubi. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
It's good to have you here. We're talking about Niger. We've dwelt on Niger for a very long time. I'm not sure that we've heard the last of it. Now, our country, even though it has been said that whatever decision was taken was an ECOWAS decision, but we have a stake in whatever happens in Niger and the borders with Niger. We have like 7 states bordering Niger, and our president is the chairman of ECOWAS. But there was a pronouncement that there will be military might, used in Niger. Now they're talking diplomacy and all that. You are in the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. How does that hurt or what does that say about the direction of our foreign policy? Because we should be able to marry that with the fact that we have a foreign policy that protects our people. So this kind of action done by ECOWAS and pronounced by our president, who is their chairman, what does that say about our foreign policy?
Thank you very much. I think first I want to correct an impression. It wasn't a pronouncement by our president. It was a pronouncement as at that instance, by the chairman of ECOWAS. It was what was agreed at the ECOWAS, the summit meeting with regards to intervention in the Niger crisis, political crisis. And so, but that said, I want us to come back home.
Let me just ask that, maybe for sentiments or whatever reason it is. If you find out that you are chairing a particular group and they're spoiling for a fight with your community, is it because you're chairing that group that you'll allow it?
Can I just
For instance, if it was a Buhari that has ties with Niger, that has cousins in Niger, who even said that when he retires, he may be going to Niger and all that, will he just readily accept it?
No, this is not about the individual.
Can't he influence it as a chairman?
I'm
just trying to establish.
That's why I'm here. You brought me here to make some
Sense out of it,
clarifications.
yes.
Elementary foreign policy. Elementary foreign policy. When you're a student of foreign policy, what they teach you is that there are levels of analysis. Now, the levels of analysis could be global level of analysis. Invariably, what happens at the global level can mastermind or influence foreign policy actions or inactions. Now, whatever happened in the state level too, which is the state instead of the domestic politics, that is, when I mean states here, is referred to countries. Yeah. Now, that again, the bureaucracy, we call that the inside-out approach. That also influences foreign policy. Now, when you move beyond that level of analysis, there's a step level of analysis, which is the personal level of analysis. That has to do with the idiosyncratic values of leadership. That means the leadership itself, the elites in domestic politics could influence, just the same way the pressure groups and all that could influence foreign policy. So in that state, from your if I have to establish, from your premises, yes, those levels of analysis affect foreign policy. But you see, the whole essence of foreign policy is to protect your sovereignty, to protect your territorial integrity. As a matter of fact, to protect the national interest of the states, of the country. Now, what are these national interests, core values? Those are the few of the things I've listed. Now, over the years, we have added other foreign policy trusts like citizens diplomacy and economic diplomacy, which is joined to what we have from 1960s, under the Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, where he talked about non-alignment policy and a host of other policies like the African-centered foreign policy. Now, what has happened? You see, every leader must be concerned. The community itself, which is, I'm talking about ECOWAS, also have to be concerned. You remember that, or I want you to understand that whatever happens in any country has the tendency to precipitate into other countries. Now, for instance, the Nigerian crisis, now the military purchase, the coup, the military junta that took over, now it could create internally discords and crisis. Now, what the community is trying to do is to avoid the spillover effect from the military takeover, because now let's take it.
And
let's be no. You see, Agbula, who was formerly in the resistance, has actually come out. He's from the Tuareg community. Has actually come out to say that he is ready to go against the military junta. And so you see now there are within the states, Niger right now, there are crises ongoing. So what we are trying to do, and that is what any president would do, is to avoid this trickle-down effect into our borders. But you see, like I have said in many instances, you see, military intervention, should be the last options. Now, we should look at other options, soft options, before getting to that point. But now, even if you look at the communique, as at yesterday's meeting that was released, that aspect of intervention is actually almost the last. The other ones, if you look at the communique, the D and E, is talking about other options like negotiation, conciliation, arbitration, mediation, and all that. So I think what I have noticed over this couple of weeks is that we try to revolve the actions and inactions of the Nigerian government. We relate it to the personalities. But I think, at this point, the crisis in West Africa goes beyond just the personality of the leaders. It must revolve around the impact of the community.
That brings us to the question of how strong and firm our leader, as a president of Nigeria, can be. What kind of say can he have in the African affairs, international affairs? How much can he stand to protect his people? I'm saying this because, if ECOWAS were to go into war with Niger, who will finance it? The bulk of this financing will come from Nigeria, which is suffering at this moment financially. Who will bear the brunt? We are the ones bordering Niger. So we have like 7 states that will have, collateral damage when the war comes up. And you've said that the fight or the military intervention should have been the last resort, but they should use it as the first thing that they...
No, I don't think
so. But that was the pronouncement.
Because when, you see, the pronouncement was 10, that if need be, you see, sometimes we have to place these things in context. If need be, we are going to intervene. It's not just ECOWAS. The other countries that are also being impacted by the military coup in Niger, like the West, they are ready. They are saying that America has cut ties in terms of foreign aid to military aid and the other cooperations they had with Niger.
Okay.
And so I think we have to look at the impact of what is happening across West Africa, how it's going to impact on Nigeria precisely now, because we're talking about our country. Yeah. Now, and that is why, if you look at the public opinion, you see, public opinion has a way of also impacting on the decisions of government. And so if you look at public opinion, everybody is saying we shouldn't intervene in Niger, right? And the National Assembly, too.
No, we should intervene with military.
Militarily in Niger, because the cost will be too much for Nigeria, And already the military, our Nigeria's military is already stretched. We are fighting insurgency in the north, terrorism across the Sahel, And so, like I have advised from the preliminary stage when all this whole crisis came up, I looked at, you have to look at the Sahel. Sahel is the hottest spot in West Africa right now. And the place, if care is not taken, it will degenerate to an extent that nobody within the community can manage the Sahel. even up to North Africa. And so this is exactly why we are trying to safeguard that, the government actually is trying to safeguard that kind of possible chaotic nature of the Sahel. Now, look at what has happened 2 weeks ago when the whole issue of intervention came on board. All the countries within West Africa with military leaders, they all form an alliance with Niger. Now imagine we have 15 countries in ECOWAS. 4 is off. They are forming an alliance. So we have about 11 countries left, Now imagine going to war. So it's going to be like a war of all against all.
Then they're signing alliances with some other international, some other countries.
Like I said in some other forum, so a few days after that proposed declaration or position, Niger moved their military to, Algeria moved their military to the borders of Niger. Meanwhile, you see, we are also looking at the fact that this whole scenario has some form of external interference and intervention. Now Libya is not actually happy with what has happened. So there is a possibility North Africans will also join. These alliances, and these are things that we are trying. And I'm happy anyway because you see what the community has done is to checkmate or preempt the future, and they have sent delegates, to Algeria, to Libya, to keep talking to them and see how they could negotiate, how they could help to negotiate the military government in Niger.
Now, what does this say about the relationship of Africa and the West? Because virtually all of them that are coming to take power, they're talking about the exploitation of the West of Africa. They take our resources, the uneven marriage between Francophone countries, for instance, and France itself. They control their money, they control a lot of things, they take their natural resources and give them pittance and all that. So how has this, or how does this define the relationship that we currently have with the West, African countries now?
You see, international relations or interstate relations is about interest. So it's about mutual benefit. It's supposed to be win-win relations. But unfortunately, over the years, the developing world have not had it on a win-win situation with the advanced economies or the superpowers. And even with the emerging powers, they have never had, there's no equity. Now, if you go back to history, we were integrated into a system, a global, for instance, a global economic system or a financial system that we were never part of. And now, if you look at the history of Africa, you find out that Africa has had a not too sweet history, happy history. First, you talked about the commoditization of human beings, which is slavery. From there, they now moved in. Colonialism took effect. After colonialism, they gave independence, and even as the 60s, 50s, late 50s and 60s, when countries in Africa were having got their independence, some few leaders were actually complaining that what we got was political independence and not economic independence, and so that what has taken place, between that period up to this very moment, is what a lot of scholars we call, we refer to as neocolonialism, imperialism, and all that. Now, these interventions and these interferences exist. It's not just about the Francophone countries. It's about the superpowers and even the emerging economies, the new powers that are emerging from all parts of the globe, And so, for my thinking, let me put it this way, my thinking is that we are too fastidious. We run into quick conclusions. We put our problems on the advanced economies, some of the superpowers like the former, in quote, former colonial masters. But the case is that, you see, that cannot really happen if there is no alliances between the elites within the African, within Africa, within these states, and the external actors. For instance,